Hey, what's up, guys? This is Tony Rockamora back with Don't Waste Your Hate. Jeff is not here today. He is just finishing up a very busy part of his work season, but I wanted to get on the mic. I have a couple friends here. We have Daniel of Actual Anarchy. We have Patrick McFarlane of Liberty Weekly. And then we have the perpetual Libertarian podcast guest, Drake Lundstrom. And I just wanted to get on and talk a little bit about, I guess, the culture war and, kind of what's going on, some of the craziness from the left wing. So I know some of you guys have to jump off in a little bit, so I'm just going to get right into it. I want to play a clip from MTV talking about what they call colorism. So here we go.
And Black Brazilians. She was eventually replaced by Rockamora, a lighter-skinned woman more in line with the color of previous winners. Colorism. It sucks. This is one way racism and colorism are different. Systems of oppression favor white people, meaning black people can't technically be racist towards other black people. But clearly in this case, they can and do perpetuate colorism in their own communities. The discrimination is coming from inside of the house. Example number 3, language. There's a pretty common phrase people in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic grow up with. Cafre. Among Spanish speakers in the Caribbean, the word means someone low class or brutish, and is said by people of all colors and racial backgrounds. The word implies you're acting darker in both complexion and behavior, but the word itself carries a linguistic and cultural connection to blackness. It shares roots with the South African racial slur, Kafir. Should we have bleeped that? A colonial phrase that rose to prominence during apartheid and that's often compared to the N-word in the United States. While Cafre...
All right. So that's just a quick little thing of it. Was that the right part, Drake?
Yeah, although it's shorter than I thought it was.
Okay, so well, it was your idea to play that clip. So why don't we let you start and kind of, I know you posted this thing in a couple different groups on Facebook. So why did this trigger you so much?
So I'm at the youngest end of the millennial generation, and I'm currently on a college campus. I've had to, with my university, trying to add more diversity electives, they had speakers come in about microaggressions, they have safe space trainings on campus, just the whole litany of things that you would expect going on the college campus right now. And a big part of that is that they're literally changing language. They're saying that if what's going on in South America, things like how they literally have a caste system based off your skin color, they're saying that no longer fits the definition of racism. And that racism now means privilege plus power, or whatever buzzwords. I think that's it, but I might be getting it wrong. And they're just changing definition of words the same way they've changed definition of other words like rape to suit their purposes. And they're trying to make it so that only one group can be racist, and it's obvious if only one group's doing the bad thing, you can just crush them, right? So that's kind of what got me with this, that they're literally saying what used to be the explicit definition of racism just doesn't count anymore. But if you're a white person, you are born racist and can never change that.
And so basically, if you're a black person criticizing or being what we would have called a racist in the past for another black person or person of color, that's called colorism now. You can't use the term racism to describe it, right?
Yeah, so I guess Thomas Sowell isn't racist anymore. They can't call him that anymore, right?
No, definitely not. So, yeah, I mean, I just I've been thinking about the whole culture war thing and, kind of in relation to the libertarian side of it, I guess the anarcho-capitalist libertarian side of it. I've been trying to figure out like where we stand in the whole thing, because some people, like, for example, Stefan Molyneux, some people love him, some people hate him, some people used to love him and now hate him. But he has kind of engaged in this culture war, and he's kind of gotten on the Gavin McInnes kind of, I guess, alt-light side of it, you could say. And I'm wondering, is it the right route to take a side in this culture war or not? I don't know. Daniel, what do you think?
Well, that's a tough question. I think that the emotional feels before reals type people want to bring it into that arena. They want to make it about classes and about groups and collective identities. And if you want to be able to fight fire with fire, I can kind of understand the desire to do that. I prefer to kind of leave the race question just out of it. I mean, there are so many other things that I think are more important, like discussing the non-aggression principle and the proper use of economics and understanding of economics, because people go around advocating policy prescriptions and political solutions and voting for all sorts of things that they have zero understanding of what the effects are going to be. They might have an idea of what the intentions are going to be, and many of the bills are named as such, though they tend to do the opposite. And I think that that isn't by design in, hey, let's come up with a name that's going to be the totally opposite of what our intention is. No, I think they actually have good intentions. Most people, I think, try to do the right thing or try to do something that they view as good. Sure, there are some crazy people out there who just lust for power and are openly corrupt and deceitful. Most of them actually raise in politics, right? They rise via politics. It's the people who are the most nefarious and do the most underhanded shit that get into the positions of power. And this is an insight that Hayek introduced in The Road to Serfdom. He has a chapter on why the worst rise to the top. So I'm sort of rambling a bit here, but I think that there are other avenues that we can pursue that don't necessarily have to confront them on the same fight fire with fire. Because I think that's dangerous territory. As we've seen, they are very quick to throw the racist and Nazi at people who question affirmative action, question minimum wage, question union legislation. But all these people who are participating in that are doing it not on an economic understanding and what the effects are actually going to be. They're doing it on a very surface level thinking, and they're not engaging the argument. They're straight going to slander. And it's a way of avoiding actually confronting their own cognitive dissonance. And I think that's an area that's where we need to focus. We need to get people to, like Larkin Rose puts out in his Candles in the Dark, you get them to the point where they don't agree with themselves, whether they realize it or not. Because that's the moment where you light that flicker, and then they have to be the ones driving the desire to learn more information. They have to direct that on their own. They have to go through that process without somebody preaching at them. So I'll leave it at that and throw it back to you, Tony.
Yeah, I hear that. Now, as far as the culture war, I don't. I agree that it's not worthwhile to get into the whole idea of differences between the races and things like that. Like, I don't think that's like a productive route to go down, and I think it really just makes the alt-right kind of white ethno people. It just shows that they're just the other side of the coin of identity politics, which I don't like, especially when the identities that people are mostly associated with are, skin deep genetic stuff. So that being said, I do think it's important to kind of identify with some kind of a culture. And like the culture I would prefer to identify with is really just like a culture of, I guess, live and let live, but personal responsibility at the same time. Obviously the whole free market libertarian thing would be that, nobody should be forced to subsidize someone else's bad behavior or subsidize their behavior, period. And I do think that I think there's a distinction between like a Gavin McInnes guy versus like a Richard Spencer guy. Like, one is alt-right, one is like a little bit less than that. I don't think Gavin McInnes is overtly like a racist person. I think his wife is I don't know what she is, but I don't think she's European. So that being said, but he's really pushing this, like he claims he's an anarchist. He pushes like, but a personal responsibility thing. I think it is important to emphasize things like that. So like I would consider like a guy like Gavin an ally in the culture war because of that. And I like the fact that guys like Michael Malice and Dave Smith talk to those guys a lot. I don't know. Sorry, I am rambling too, but Pat, why don't you let me know what you think?
Well, I think it's funny you mentioned Dave Smith, because I was going to mention Dave Smith too. And I think that last week or a few months ago, he was talking about the culture war and about choosing sides and about the right spectrum embracing the tactics of the left and them just being parallels of each other, as I think you just kind of mentioned. But when it really comes down to it, I think that it's not that libertarians shouldn't embrace the left at their own tactics. And Dave kind of mentioned this, but he was saying that, you know, don't take the left's tactics, because you can't win by using the left tactics. You know, they've perfected it. They've invented these tactics, and you can't get in there and win. You like if you get down with the hunting dogs, you're going to come up with fleas. And I think that's the truth. But you're right that that's not very satisfying when it comes to, you know, what should be done. And I think for me, I think it's important to focus on the mechanisms that cause this outrage. And I was going to try and bring in the whole social media aspect of it, because that is a new element that we have to this whole idea of a culture war. You know, all these people on both sides get into their echo chambers, and they're on Facebook all the time, and they're just Facebook is just an outrage factory. It's an outrage machine. And you get it encourages, you know, James Corbett just came out with a video on this called The Weaponization of Social Media. Well, it's so true is that in fact the Facebook designers came out saying that they exploited human psychology, and they basically whenever you get group assurance, you get in your echo chamber, and then you get assurance from the group that what you're saying is acceptable, and you get little dopamine hits in your head by likes and comments and shares. And so that embraces you know, this acceptance, this need to be accepted by the group. And I think it's so damaging on both sides, and there's provoked outrage, and people get built up and worked up, and they have this idea that the whole world is against them, or they get into their little tribes, and it just gets hyper, and all of it's stewing around until it explodes. And I think that is the main mechanism I think we should be focusing on here. I don't know what you guys think about that.
So I'm gonna throw in with that the part of the things with people going on Facebook and getting outraged is it's kind of a cliche at this point, but clean up your own room first. You should focus on yourself before you go on to try to change these other things. And instead you have people that, instead of focusing on themselves first, or focusing on the other side first, and thus becoming more and more extreme. A lot of that is definitely through Facebook. But if you want to see a couple models of who's doing a really good job in all of this, the things to focus on is one of my personal favorites. Do you know Based Carrot Man?
No.
I'm assuming you all heard of Based Stick Man. Based Carrot Man was the guy that showed up in between a alt-right and a Antifa rally in a carrot costume, and just stood in the middle and made both sides feel stupid enough that they just stopped. Or you can look at like Charlottesville. In Charlottesville, there were three groups there. There was Antifa, there was the alt-right, and then there were local militia groups that were literally just standing there armed and ready in between both groups to prevent the violence, because both sides are bad. Like Dave Smith and Scott Horton have been saying recently, if you keep pushing back against the left with the right and making them culture-identitarians, that's literally the rise of Hitler. Like, I mean, they keep using him badly, but what happened with the Nazis was the communists were fighting with workers' identity politics, and then the fascists came back and said, no, we're anti-communist, but have to use their identity tactics. Like, it is a historical example of fascism, and you have to push back against both. You can't fight the race war. You have to fight the culture war. And if you're fighting the culture war, you're on the side of really good people that are calm, that are educated, that know what we're talking about, like a Jordan Peterson, like a Eric and Brett Weinstein. Like, you have a lot of really good people on their side. And as much as I hate some parts of social media, they've been given a voice because of it, and their voice is getting louder and louder every day.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. And you know, it's easy to sit here and for me to decry social media. I mean, especially because it's caused me to rage, you know, in the last few weeks, especially with this shooting that's happening. And I'm avoiding it, but there is a good point to be made, and I think you made it well, is that, well, it's a double-edged sword. You know, it can be used for bad or for good at the same time. And, you know, maybe I'm keying into the feedback mechanisms that like trigger the dopamine response, but you know, maybe to in a roundabout way answer Tony's question about, well, what should be done. Well, we're doing it right now. You know, we're talking together, and we're forming these little communities of libertarian content producers. And I guess if anything, that's the response that I would have, is the one I'm actively engaged in, just to be a sane voice. Maybe it's a little high to say that we're the sane voices, but, you know, to provide this alternate perspective that isn't based on outrage or hating group identities, but instead based on, you know, having respect and responsibility for each other and for ourselves. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's kind of I'm along the same lines of what I've been thinking. And part of this too, with the whole social media thing, it's like the fact that everything is so, I guess, you know, all these echo chambers, you know, sometimes if you're looking at social media in a certain way, you can get really cynical real fast about like what's going to happen in the future. I mean, it could be really scary, just like sometimes, especially when you're thinking about from like a libertarian perspective, a limited government perspective, even it seems like the odds are stacked against us, you know. And then you have with the social media stuff, Daniel mentioned before that one of the guests on his show, Esoteric Entity, I think was kicked off both YouTube and Twitter. I think Sargon of Akkad actually got his Google account frozen yesterday, and then it was unfrozen apparently. But either way, and it was from some infraction from like 2 years ago. You have Dave Rubin, who hasn't been able to monetize a YouTube video in a very long time. So there is clearly something that's trying to hold back this kind of right-wing-ish, alt-right / libertarian / just, I guess you could say counterculture or counter like leftist mainstream culture. But the good part about it, the thing that makes me not want to be cynical is like, you know, yeah. And also like the recent trashing of Jordan Peterson, they're like Vice trying to really go at him hard. The good part about it is they're really trying to hold back this kind of message of like personal responsibility, limited government. Like, we're not going to play your identity politics game. We're not going to feel bad. And you know, for example, if you're a white person, we're not going to just like believe like, oh yeah, I have this white privilege, and therefore I have to like bow at the altar of diversity or, you know, affirmative action or whatever it is. These voices are starting to get louder and louder, and people like YouTube, people like the mainstream media, they're starting to tighten their grip. They're really trying to, but I think that's just a sign that, hey, all of like the real intellectual stuff is coming out of this side. There's not any like equivalent of Dave Rubin on the left. You know, all you have is like a, you know, what is now like a very tired and, you know, very predictable, like the Young Turks or something like that. Like there's nothing new, there's nothing exciting. And to bring it back to the cultural thing a little bit, there's nothing funny about it. There's nothing cool about it. It's like constantly like whining victimhood, mixed with like a bunch of snarkiness and just like trying to talk down to people. And I think so sometimes I'm cynical, but then sometimes I'm like, well, no, like it doesn't seem like we're winning because they're yelling at us so much, but maybe that's the sign that, you know, things are starting to change. So yeah, I don't know.
I'm gonna throw in
Either one of you
in
guys
there a
jump
little
in.
bit as well. So I will say I do try to make it a point to interact with far socialist communist types. And if you go to the more extreme left, and then particularly the very, very anti-war left, the ones that care about consistency, they actually have some up and coming stuff, and they're a bit funnier. And they have various podcasts and things going on. Although I believe that the side of kind of Jordan Peterson, Dave Rubin stuff is currently the biggest of what's now being called the intellect. Although, to be fair, even with the Jordan Peterson, Brett Weinstein, Eric Weinstein, Dave Rubin, they fall mostly our direction, but still, like, their case is just like, oh no, you can't have like this dismiss anarcho-capitalist ideas out of hand, or they talk about how you need regulation of the market and various things like that. So there is some pushback there. Even so, there's a lot of good things, but essentially everyone's pushing back against one group, which is the kind of more mainstream. And what we really have to ask ourselves is, who are they? Because what we know as libertarians is you don't have groups, you just have individuals. And the question is it just the reporters that give 96% of donations to Hillary Clinton? Is it the HR managers, which are educated as thick as can be in diversity and kind of like little Marxists that control the hiring processes? Like, what is it about these large companies that are making them act this way? Because they're not evil. They're just driven by either the overall profit motive or certain people's personal motives. And what are they? Because if we don't know, we can't really affect it properly.
Well, what do you think it is? I mean, what comes to mind for me is that what they are is basically someone who doesn't want to be shouted at as an oppressor. That's kind of what comes to my mind. And that's why they are willing to, you know, make these donations to people like Hillary Clinton, or, you know, kind of, you know, be supportive of like what is kind of more the mainstream left culture. I think it's more of a fear of being cast as an oppressor or as some kind of a racist, you know, or bigot or something, rather than any sincere ideological belief. You know, it's more of like, let me just go along to get along. And, you know, at the moment, it seems like the leftists have kind of control of a lot of these information disseminators, these institutions. So, you know, they do kind of, I guess, bow to that in some way. That's my initial thought.
Well, if I could get conspiratorial here, as maybe is my role in the Libertarian Union, so James Corbett released this video today that I mentioned before called "The Weaponization of Social Media," and what better tool? I mean, if you're a member of the state, if you're a member of the deep state, what better tool for directly influencing public opinion than social media? I mean, just straight up. And if we take the lessons from Anatomy of the State, and I think I'll anchor this in, you know, Rothbardian philosophy, but how does the state preserve itself? That's a whole chapter, you know? Well, we have the intellectual class and we have the opinion molders. And I mean, what better mechanism to manipulate public opinion than social media? And what James Corbett kind of documents is DARPA, is this deep state research project. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but DARPA, this study coming out from DARPA, studying effectively or essentially how they can manipulate people's emotions and people's moods on social media. And I'll include that link if I can find it. But this is, I mean, it would be naive to think that the government and that certain intelligence agencies are not seeing how they can use social media to manipulate public opinion. And I think that's really what's behind it here, is the deep state and these private interests and private actors, you know, getting behind these platforms and using it to their benefit. I know before we went on the mic, and Drake, maybe you can talk about this, we were talking about Tom Wood's episode had that the guy come on talking about Google search results and how simply changing what order search results appear in, you can manipulate the outcome of elections or manipulate voters. Drake, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, first, I'm going to give you one fast statistic that is worth noting. On 2017, the daily social media usage of global internet users amounted to 135 minutes per day, up from 126 minutes per day previous year. And if you've read Chasing the Scream, First and Last Days of the War on Drugs, or if you listen to interviews with the author, who is excellent, what you'll know is that addiction comes from many things, not just drugs. The majority of addiction is mental, and you have addiction when your life lacks connection. And I would definitely classify Facebook and other social media as a drug. It can be like drugs can be party drugs. Like you can have fun with alcohol, you can be safe, but I if I could adjust culture a little bit, I would like people shamed for spending more than an hour a day on Facebook. I don't think you should wake up and turn it on. I turned off all electronics for a week, and afterwards deleted my Facebook app. And when I finally re-added it, because I needed to for an organization that I organize, I just keep it on with no notifications. And it's just there. It's very powerful, and you need to realize that you're drugging yourself and measure your dose. And that ties back into the Tom Wood Show episode, because what they have measured now is Facebook setting a put out the vote message, just telling everyone, hey, go vote, has a significant increase on the people that actually come out and vote in an election. It could have up to I believe it was a 5% in turnout, which imagine if that was targeted at just Hillary Clinton voters or just Donald Trump voters or just anyone. That would, with American elections, that would be the difference through most elections in my lifetime. And beyond that, things like Google search, literally just the order in which Google ranks its searches, the autofill when you start typing in things, lets people know, like, it affects whether they think things are true or false. It affects the way that they vote. And there is just a colossal amount of evidence that Google was changing search results to show Hillary Clinton in a less favorable light this last election. And to show her in a more favorable light this last election. And we can't overlook that. And honestly, when there's one company that is currently the vast majority of things, even though I believe like most monopolies will eventually fall through the free market unless prompted by government, we have to look at how it affects things, because it has an impact.
It definitely affects things. I'm sorry, go ahead, Pat.
Well, I was going to say, well, yeah, and we don't even know the effect this is having. You know, we haven't even had one generation yet of people who have been affected and grown up in social media. It's only been like, what, 10 years? So, I mean, this could be having horribly terrible effects, and I think we're beginning to see this amongst children. And I think the most telling part about it that Corbett talks about is that these the people like Mark Zuckerberg or the guy who Justin Timberlake played in in that movie about Facebook, they won't even let their kids on social media. They are actively preventing their kids from using social media. I mean, this could be horribly, terribly detrimental to people, and I think it is. And this is anecdotal, but I've noticed it in my own life that I'm a terrible person the more I use Facebook, you know? So what were you going to say, Tony?
Well, just to jump off that, I mean, there are some days when I'm like, okay, let me check my notifications. Oh, I got a notification, blah, 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 like checking Facebook, checking Twitter here and there. And then there are days where, for whatever reason, I'm busy doing something else. I just don't look at it. And if I go a little while without looking at it, the urge to look at it further just diminishes completely. So, I mean, that dopamine rush or whatever it is that you get just from someone liking your posts or tagging you in a reply, it's real. So, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, at least from my anecdotal personal experience, I have felt that same thing. So I mean, so that coupled with the fact that YouTube, Facebook, Twitter are censoring a huge amount of people, and then also with the Google search, they're also pushing stuff that they find to be more in line with the politics, I guess, or the cultural views of whoever is kind of running the company that we're talking about, YouTube, I mean, Google in this case. It's clearly going to have some kind of an effect. I mean, I had recently had a conversation that I don't know if it's ever going to air anywhere, but I had a conversation with a guy who was at one point an anarcho-capitalist of the Austrian persuasion. Basically, whatever we consider ourselves, he was that. And then he decided to take the turn to he interprets Hans Hoppe as a guy who then goes down that alt-right ethno-state route, which, I mean, I don't know if you can really put Hans Hoppe as far down that road as some of the other people have gone. Regardless, the point is he went down that road, and now he is talking to all these alt-right people who are more concerned with the white race than anything else, right? And the thing I said in this conversation to him, and kind of the thing that has been on my mind about it, is like, Twitter kicked them off, Facebook kicked them off, YouTube kicked them off. So now these guys have all migrated to Gab, I believe. Now, Gab is essentially a place that is filled with these alt-right people, some of them white supremacists, a lot of them like that, a lot of crazy racial epithets being thrown around. Like, I mean, I don't go on there. I don't even have a user ID there, but the point is I know what it's about. And I think like when Twitter and them, they separate people off, no one is allowed to then approach these people and knock down their arguments. So now you have all these people on Gab who probably feel like, oh man, we're like a really big movement, man. Like all these people who agree with me and believe that white supremacy and white ethno state is a good thing, and there's nobody else on there to smack down what I would view, and I'm sure you guys would view as like a stupid idea. They just think that, oh dude, look how big this movement is. We have our own community here and we're huge, and maybe getting them on YouTube and having people who are thinking more like us, or thinking even more like I don't know, just people who don't go down that road, to smack them down is a good thing. But these social media people, I think they're doing a disservice to the world by censoring and corralling away people with views that should just be smacked down.
I agree. I'm gonna take it even a step farther than that. If you look at someone like Owen Benjamin, who essentially came out and said that he thinks that 5-year-olds shouldn't be given hormone blockers, which is a relatively not extreme position in the grand scope of history. He got trashed, torn down, kicked from social media, and he's built up his own supporting following group now. If they call themselves the Bears, and it's fun to listen to their kind of stuff. But he spent a few nights just arguing to 3 a.m. against white nationalists, because the thing is, the second you say, I don't think 5-year-olds should block hormones and sterilize themselves, never go through puberty, you're kicked from social media, you're kicked from respectable society and into the group of white nationalists and into the alt-right. And these groups, the thing is, you're the average of the 4 people you spend the most time around. And if you're being forced, the only people that will take you in is this group of extremists, I mean, that's how indoctrination happens to some degree. Like, I mean, obviously, it's not as bad as what the left is scared about when they make documentaries about how any red pill anti-feminist movement is secretly trying to make you a racist Nazi. But there is a degree of truth saying that if you have any of these ideas, the only place you can go is the alt-right. You're going to get more people in the alt-right. And that's a similar thing that you saw like in Germany, where they made Nazi ideas as legally banned as possible. And the second they allow the Mein Kampf to be sold on stores again, the first 4 or 5 sellings all sell out as literally as soon as they hit the store shelves. Because if you repress it, if you repress a really bad thing and you repress regular people as well, you repress those regular people into the group of really bad people and change them in a negative direction.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Basically, if people are trying to kick you out of polite society and for having some view that they don't like, if everybody's telling you you're an asshole and the only people who are willing to talk to you are people with really shitty ideas like the white supremacist type stuff, then would you rather hang out with people who think you're a piece of shit, or would you rather hang out with people who are willing to let you hang out? I mean, it's just human nature. People want to be accepted. And you brought up Owen Benjamin. So I don't know if you know, but I just saw his I think it was yesterday or the day before, live stream. He's being essentially run out of town in the place that he lives. He lives up in upstate New York. And I believe he had a joke where he used the N-word. And he's a guy who kind of really pushes this cultural war stuff. He doesn't want censorship. He doesn't want anything like that. And I guess he used the N-word in a joke, and some people in the town got wind of it. And I guess they just really started attacking him to the point where he's like, listen, like my brother lives here. My family lives here. I love this town, but like, I am essentially being run out of town and I have to leave. I have to pick up and leave this place. And this is like in the last day or two. So the left, the cultural Marxists, whatever you want to call them, they're going after people and they're going out for blood. And, that's the kind of activity that's going to I don't think Owen Benjamin's going to get pushed down that road, but he's literally getting pushed out of a town. And, if anything was going to push someone into the arms of the white ethno-state people, I mean, that's the kind of activity that's going to do it.
Yeah, that's toxic. I mean, talk about further divisions. I think you guys have covered it pretty well, but I guess the one thing I was going to mention is that there's other places to go too, aside from just Gab. And I think, Six Hexenhammer 666 is another one that is maybe a little bit on the alt-light, but isn't really an ANCAP or anything like that. But he's been pushing BitChute, and I have too. And I've been getting after guys in the Libertarian Union, Tony, to start posting their stuff on BitChute because, I mean, we've seen, YouTube went through with their latest round of getting rid of people, and we mentioned Sargon of Akkad was targeted. But, I mean, BitChute is there, and if you sign up and get an account, it automatically uploads your YouTube videos with the same thumbnail and description, so you don't have to do anything. And it's peer-to-peer, so it's not centrally controlled per se. And I think it's been growing, and it's presenting a valid alternative, I think, and I think it'll only get bigger and bigger. I have almost just as many subscribers on BitChute as I do on YouTube. And so I'm excited for that to grow. I mean, it's still a relatively small community, so if you get your content on there, you can get noticed a little better, I think, than YouTube. But there's also Minds.com, which is moving to a cryptocurrency format, and I think they've integrated like a payment system. But there's BitChute, or Steemit and DTube. I don't know if I mentioned this to you guys too, but Steemit, you get paid with cryptocurrency, and DTube is a video platform that's peer-to-peer and on the blockchain like that. So, I mean, there are alternatives presenting themselves even now, and I think as YouTube cracks down even harder, we're going to see that even further splintering and radicalization of views and echo chambers. But I think we will also see a paradigm shift where BitChute and all these alternative platforms start overtaking the YouTube's traffic and Facebook's traffic. And even now, I think BitChute has more users than VidMe did at their peak. So it's up and coming. And I know in the early days, Daniel was saying specifically, I'll throw him under the bus, that BitChute was a little hokey and a little sketch looking. But now, I mean, it looks legit. I mean, I I would screen share here. I don't want to mess up the video feed, but it looks legit. I mean, the UI is looking good. I have it in night mode, and it looks pretty sexy. So I would encourage all of you guys to get on BitChute. I mean, if only for the activism, but also for, you know, personal reasons of getting more attention.
I will also say that things like Patreon has still done a very good job of not kicking people off, except for more extreme reasons, and that something like that, or
Maker support.
things where, yeah, well, not just that, but things where you have a very dedicated small community. So the thing is, anyone can join a Facebook group, but people look for an intentional community where they can choose who they're around. Something where you have to pay to enter, like a Patreon, has become more and more popular, literally just because you want to be around people you're around. I mean, that's why Tom Wood's Facebook group of supporting listeners is so successful and effective, because we all want to be there with each other. And that's where I really see, once again, Jordan Peterson doing some of his best work. Is not even that his ideas are great, but one of the best things he's contributing is that he is a separate movement outside the mainstream that you can go to that is anti the alt-right. So essentially, he is a bulwark, a last stop to get off the bus before you go over the cliff. So he's done a very good job and gathered people and saved them from depression and other things, because he's taken people that have nowhere else to go and given them like a community.
Yeah, I love what Peterson is doing, and I think it's an important thing you just said, that he is that, like, I guess, last stop, or one of the last stops before you go over that cliff into a world that we don't want to go into. But they hate him. The people on the other side of that cliff hate him, you know, because he doesn't recognize their BS identity stuff, and he's a serious intellectual, and he has a lot of good arguments against it. So I am heartened by the fact that all of these people who are like, I don't mind, like the alt-lite, I think there is a distinction there, and I guess Peterson could be part of that in a broad sense. And I think it should be like, we should be willing to talk to people like that, and because it's a wider tent, and I think our ideas are the ones that are the most consistent. So I think getting in those conversations with guys like Peterson and on that route, they have, and even like a Joe Rogan, you know, it's those are the people that we should all be trying to talk to more, instead of playing the purity test game that a lot of ANCAPs like to play. And I like what Michael Malice says, is like, you know, libertarians shouldn't be fighting other libertarians, you know, just especially if it's about who's the most libertarian. I mean, we can do that at a certain point, and I think we shouldn't emphasize it, is the point. You know, there's no need to emphasize that. When you have a guy who's considers himself like a classical liberal, it's like, okay, man, like I would much rather live in your world than live in a socialist's world. And, you know, I just think I could show you an even better way, but, you know, there's no reason not to talk, you know?
I know that I would like people keep talking about really small or really big tents. I want a medium-sized tent. And I don't want to like just let everyone in, but what I would like is a medium-sized tent with a colossal sign, because we should be willing to talk to anyone, no matter how much you disagree with them. So I do lots of student activism, and we've hosted debates between Republican Democrats, Libertarians, and Socialists, and we managed to get the Socialists on stage twice. And both time, the reason we had trouble getting them back on the second time, and why they've declined from getting back on the third time, is every time we get them on stage, they on net lose members. Because when we hold up their ideas to the light of day, to the light of everyone else's, they're like, wow. Just, yeah.
Well, I mean,
and the thing is, you don't see it when you're in their echo chamber. And when you have these people leave the Socialist Club, I don't know necessarily want every single like social democratic socialist that voted for Bernie and wants a giant welfare state to then join the Libertarian Club. Like I don't want them to join. I would love them to convert to like to become a libertarian and then join. But if they're still not libertarian, I don't necessarily want them to like say they're part of our movement yet. But I want us to be a medium-sized tent with giant speakers and signs and like flashing our message to everyone and letting anyone that wants to come in and talk to us come in and talk to us, because we will show their people what their ideas really mean when you realize that the state is violence.
Yeah, I mean, historical examples aside, the ideas on their face are just bad. You know, especially the socialist ideas, they're terrible. So, I mean, talking to them is like a win for people on our ends, because when you look at the world through the lens of like a Tom Woods, when you're following his thought process and seeing the world through that ANCAP lens, it makes a whole lot of sense. It makes some of the most consistent sense when you look at history, when you look at where we are today. The explanation of why the world is the way it is and what could make it better, what were the forces of good in the past versus the forces of evil, if you want to get all objective morality about it, you know, his lens is a good one to look through, and I think it has the best explanation of the world, and so why not tell everybody we can?
Well, and that's why I think that people get so evangelical when they are converted to libertarianism. And I mean, I knew I was evangelical like that. I mean, and it's funny, and this is, I guess, anecdotal evidence, but when everyone in our community, they first discover it, everyone has that evangelical phase. And that's something that I've noticed talking to everyone. And I think, that you're just like, hey, you know, I found these truths. They're really good. Come everyone here. And brethren, you know, let me announce it from the mountainside. But so you have everyone that gets into that phase too. But I don't see that in other places, really. I mean, the excitement and just the passion that liberty advocates have, and I think it's a positive passion. But
I will say,
yeah.
I do see it one other place, and that is with like people on the like keto or low carb diet.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be really, really biased and say I see it in those two areas, just because those are the two areas that are right. Because I mean, I've lost just about 60 pounds now since I started going low carb, and like lots of other health benefits. Seems to work quite well. And then I've been winning debates consistently since I became a libertarian. So something's going right.
Well, the great thing about the keto low carb thing, and used to be more of like a paleo primal blueprint thing. I read Mark Sisson's Primal Blueprint probably like 10 years ago at this point. And I've been basically eating that way, ups and downs, because it's not always easy. But the thing that the theme between the two seemingly separate things is, hey, the government's been telling you the wrong thing. The government's been pushing a certain way of living on you, and they were completely wrong. And not only were they wrong, but they have been taking money out of your pocket to push the wrong thing. So I think that's why both of those movements kind of are intertwined in some way as well.
Well, yeah, no, I just went. Have you ever listened to Dangerous History podcast? He has a 2-part episode breakdown of all of the sugar subsidization, and like, there's a lot of really crazy stuff that happened with the U.S. on sugar. I think it's called the Cane Kingdom Part 1 and 2. Just what all happened with draining the swamps in Florida and all that. Sorry, Pat, I cut you off.
Oh no, I didn't know that you guys. I'd never really heard of this idea before that. You know, I know that Prof. CJ had those episodes on the sugar issue. That's crazy. I didn't connect those two. Well, yeah.
There's that, and there's also things like the food pyramid. I think Tom Woods had someone on the female reporter that wrote I don't even remember what the book's called now. Yeah, can't remember the name of the book, but there's a few people that have come out against it, and then there's some other famous things, like there's the government in South Africa is trying to crack down on people that are trying to say that low carb, higher fat and protein and vegetable diets are bad for you, and other things like that. Like there are some government intertwined areas with it also.
Interesting. Well,
yeah, I mean, the food pyramid is one of the biggest atrocities committed on like the domestic population, you know, and it really is. But, you know, people will essentially, people don't think about it like that. But if you think about like the multi-generational effects that the government has had just with its food policies, it's freaking crazy, man. It's scary.
Yeah. Well,
don't waste your hate. Direct all hate right at the FDA.
Yeah, they deserve quite a bit of it. I'm telling you, man.
Oh, yeah.
I remember them pushing the food pyramid when we were just kids in public school. I mean, yeah, I
could do a full episode on just that, because like, I'm sorry, if I start, you're never gonna get off this call.
It's true. I mean, you know, they're still holding on to it. They haven't completely even abandoned the food pyramid. They adjust it here and there, but it still is talking about, you know, bread and dairy and all this stuff. You know, they don't demonize sugar the way they should. It's, you know, if you want to know how to eat, do not ask the federal government. That's basically the theme there.
And Michelle Obama, for all the jokes we make about her trying to fix the school lunches, she actually went into it with pretty decent nutrition advice and other things, and she lost to the sugar lobby. Like it's literally just that simple. Michelle Obama, for all that I don't like what ended up coming out of her program, went in with good intentions and lost to lobbyists.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
It's all crazy.
So, any other thoughts coming up based on this culture war aside from the food pyramid? I know we got into that, which I love talking about that stuff, but
yeah, sorry.
Well, I guess I would just end by saying, you know, we can reach out to some people on the alt-right, I think, if only people really understood libertarianism. And I think that's the biggest hang-up, because like Styx Hexenhammer had this big episode about why libertarians are wrong on the border issue or something like that. And it was so patently obvious that he had no idea. He had never read Rothbard. It was just obvious that he hadn't internalized Frederick Bastiat's The Law. He hadn't internalized or didn't understand or didn't read Anatomy of the State. And I think if, like we were saying, you know, a lot of critiques, and this isn't just anecdotal. I mean, a lot of the critiques of libertarianism are made by people who just don't understand it, and that you can demonstrate that. And I think if we just got people to understand or to read and to engage with the material, if they really understood it, I am like 99% confident that they would see the light, I guess. Maybe that's a little too grandiose, but what do you guys think, just in closing here?
I guess I'll take first swing at it then. Sorry. So I think we both came in at the same time.
Oh, it's all good.
So right now we're looking at the generation that got indoctrinated by public schools, that got indoctrinated by the media, that got the beginning of social media and got hit really hard, and they weren't prepared. And things are kind of falling apart for them. And right now, people like Jordan Peterson, like Dave Rubin, like Tom Woods are stepping in and creating communities to pick up the pieces and make things better. And for all of the gloom and doom, we need to remember that the Gen Z, the younger generation rising up, that's I believe like 13 to 21-year-olds, is extremely anti-leftist, is more libertarian, is more free market. We need to remember that the vast majority of Americans trust neither Congress nor the mainstream media nor the president. We need to remember that for all of the bad out there, there's a lot of really, really good things going on, because our country had a lot of good cultural things to start with, and we're not starting from scratch. There's a strong foundation. Things are kind of broken, but it's easier to build a house when you already have a bunch of bricks lying all over the place. And libertarians are doing a pretty good job of it, and the movement is larger and stronger than it has ever been in history. So there's still a lot of good going on. We just need to really take that ball and roll with it.
Well, I'm sorry if I could just with this one point. I think we're on the front lines right now. You know, this conversation we're having, and I keep outlining this in all the talks that I have with people. But this is the frontline battleground, I think. So sorry, Tony.
No, it's good. I agree. We're definitely, trying to do our part here at, Don't Waste Your Hate, at the Libertarian Union in general. I think the thing that I sometimes get too cynical about is just like looking at, like I said, like the powers that be and the way they try to influence things. But I don't want to be cynical anymore, and I don't think it's a good idea to be cynical. I think we're on the right side of things, number one. And I think, like I said, talking to people is the most important thing. And we don't always have to talk about Rothbard. We don't always have to talk about, the Austrian business cycle theory. We could just talk to people and show that, no, we're just normal people. We just have spent a lot more time thinking about, our current situation. Most people are just kind of lulled to sleep by the comforts that they live in, quote unquote. And yeah, it's a fairly comfortable society that we live in for compared to the rest of humanity. Sure. But we've just spent a lot more time thinking about what brought us to this point of comfort and what direction do we need to go. And if we can kind of intertwine that just with this this show of, hey, Pat's just a regular guy, Drake's just a regular guy. We have fun interests that are not strictly libertarian, but we're also just decent people who, when it really comes down to it, we want you to live however you want. We just don't want to have to pay for it, and vice versa. We don't want you to ever have to take a dime out of your pocket to do to support something that I do that you might not like. So I think, like I said before, the ideas are what's worthwhile that we have. And, just the fact that you see how decent people like Dave Rubin and Tom Woods and all of these guys, Dave Smith, they are just decent people. And I think people are attracted to decency. People are attracted to humility, and people are attracted to again, just people who are funny, and I think we have the upper hand in that, and I think that's why these social media giants and the mainstream media and the institution, the academia, I think that's why they're tightening their grip, because they're losing their grip, And so I want to end it on a positive note. So thank you guys for coming on. Check out Pat at Liberty Weekly. We'll link to that. Check us all out on the Libertarian Union. Daniel dropped off before, but check him out. Actual Anarchy. And Drake, you can check out pretty much everywhere. Any Libertarian podcast, he's going to be there. He'll be in all the Facebook groups too. So
yeah.
Thank you guys for coming
on.
Now
statistics for the Freedom Tunes. So and new recent Freedom Tunes videos may have me contributing statistics like to his recent gun one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll link to Freedom Tunes too. I've heard some great things. There's so much good stuff out there. I haven't even really been able to check that out. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and, share the show. All right. Take care.